What if the train that carried your future never came, and the only thing between you and a different life was a storm that refused to end? The 9 o'clock bell still echoed when Clara Hartwell stepped inside the Colorado Springs depot, shaking snow from her worn brown dress. February wind rattled the windows as she approached the telegraph window, her fingers working the yellowed paper in her coat pocket. "Any word from Denver, Mr. Kowalski?" she asked the clerk, though she'd checked twice already this week. "Nothing for you, miss." He glanced at the storm building outside. "Last eastbound just pulled out. Won't be another till the pass clears." Clara nodded, watching through frosted glass as a tall man in an expensive coat paced the platform, consulting a silver pocket watch. The storm had other plans for him, she reckoned. She pulled the telegram from her pocket, unfolding edges soft with handling. "Denver Mining Consortium. Position available. Reply by the 15th of February. Today was the 14th. "Sending something?" Kowalski asked. "Not today." She refolded the paper, tucking it away. A teaching position in Denver would mean leaving everything her students at the one-room schoolhouse, Mrs. Chen, who brought her soup when she was poorly, the small life she'd built since Papa died. The depot door opened with a gust of snow and cursing. The man in the fine coat stomped inside, pulling off leather gloves. "When's the next eastbound?" His voice carried the clip of Eastern money. "Spring thaw, most likely. Storm settling in to stay." Kowalski pointed to the barometer. "Dropping fast." The man's jaw worked like he might argue with the weather itself. Clara noticed his boots polished leather that had never seen a day's honest work. There must be alternate transport. A private coach. Through Ute Pass in this blow? Kowalski shook his head. "You'd be froze solid before Palmer Lake." Clara turned toward the door, but the wind hit like a slap when she opened it. Snow drove horizontal now, turning the world white. She glimpsed the cook from the Antlers Hotel, hurrying toward the depot, her basket clutched tight. "Best get somewhere warm," the woman called as she pushed through the door. "This one's got teeth." The stranger studied Clara as she brushed snow from her shawl. "You live in town?" "Teaching at the schoolhouse." "About a mile north." "In this storm?" He glanced at her thin coat, her worn boots with cardboard showing through the sole. She lifted her chin. "I've walked farther in worse." But when she opened the door again, the wind drove her back inside. The cook shook her head, setting down her basket with a thump. "Nobody's walking anywhere tonight. Mrs. Patterson sent me with supper for the station master, figured folks might get stranded." Steam rose from covered pots. The smell of beef stew made Clara's stomach clench. She'd eaten nothing since morning but cornbread. The stranger pulled out his silver watch, checked it against the depot clock. "How long do these storms typically last?" "Could be 3 days. Could be a week." Kowalski trimmed the lamp wick. "Best settle in." Clara fingered the telegram through her coat pocket. By the time this storm passed, the Denver position would be filled. She'd spend another winter teaching children whose families paid her in potatoes and promises. The cook ladled stew into tin bowls. "No charge tonight. Storm makes neighbors of us all." The stranger reached for his wallet, but she waved him off. "Your money's no good in a blizzard, mister." Clara accepted a bowl gratefully, noticing how the man's eyes lingered on her threadbare sleeves, the careful mending at her cuffs. When their fingers brushed as he handed her a spoon, his was soft as a child. Outside, the wind howled like something wild and hungry. The depot stove glowed red by 10 o'clock, fighting the cold that seeped through every crack. Clara sat on a wooden bench, her empty bowl warming her hands, watching the stranger pace between window and door like a caged cat. Thomas Ashworth, he'd introduced himself when the cook pressed them to share names. "I have business in Chicago that cannot wait." "Clara Hartwell," she'd replied, not mentioning the telegram. "Surely there's some conveyance. A freight wagon. Mail sledge." "Mail doesn't run in weather like this," Kowalski said from behind his wire cage. "Even the Overland boys got sense enough to hole up." The cook, Mrs. Emma Bradshaw from the hotel kitchen, ladled more stew. "What's so all-fired important in Chicago, if you don't mind my asking?" Thomas's jaw tightened. "A merger. My father's company depends on it." Clara caught something in his voice, not just urgency, but fear. She pulled the telegram from her pocket, smoothing it on her knee. The paper felt thin as hope. "Important letter?" Thomas asked, settling beside her on the bench. "Job offer. Teaching position." She didn't mention the salary, $60 a month, more than she made in 3 months here. Reply, due tomorrow. "And now you're trapped." He studied her face in the lamplight. "Like both of us." The wind gusted hard enough to rattle the depot walls. Mrs. Bradshaw banked the stove and settled into a chair with her knitting needles clicking. "Storm's got its own timeline," she said. "Might as well make peace with it." But Thomas stood again, pacing to the frosted window. Clara watched him rub a clear spot with his sleeve, peering into the white darkness. "How far to Denver by road?" 70 miles through the mountains. In good weather." Kowalski wound the depot clock. "Take you 2 days by coach if you didn't freeze or go over a cliff. I'll pay whatever it takes." "Can't spend money if you're dead, son." Clara refolded her telegram, tucking it away. Tomorrow would come, whether she was ready or not. The Denver consortium would hire someone else, probably a man who wouldn't hesitate to leave everything behind for opportunity. "You regret not taking chances?" Thomas asked, settling beside her again. "I regret taking the wrong ones." She thought of Papa's mining claims, the fortune he'd chased until consumption claimed him instead. Sometimes the safe path is the only path, and sometimes it's a trap. His fingers found his watch chain. My father built an empire thinking that way. Never risked anything he couldn't afford to lose. Sounds wise. Does it? Thomas's laugh held no humor. He's dying now. Lung fever. And his empire's crumbling because he never taught me to take the chances he wouldn't. Mrs. Bradshaw's needles paused. Outside, the storm pressed against the windows like it was trying to get in. "What would you do?" Thomas asked. "If this storm wasn't here, if you could catch that train," Clara considered, "I'd probably stay. Safe teaching job. Children who need me. A place where folks know my name. Even if it meant missing your chance, even then." But her fingers found the telegram again. "What about you?" "I'd be on that train, racing toward a merger I don't understand, hoping desperation looks enough like confidence to fool a boardroom of sharks." The depot clock chimed 11. Mrs. Bradshaw gathered her empty pots, covering them with checked cloths. "Hotel's just down the street, but might as well be in Kansas City tonight. You folks can make do with blankets and the stove. I'll check on you come morning." She pulled on her heavy coat, wrapping a scarf around her face. Storm like this, sometimes the best thing is just to wait it out together. The door opened on a wall of white. Mrs. Bradshaw stepped into it and disappeared like she'd never existed at all. Clara pulled her thin shawl closer, watching Thomas stare out at the emptiness where the cook had vanished. "Scared?" she asked. "Terrified." He checked his watch again. "You? Always." But for the first time in months, Clara wasn't sure what frightened her more, missing her chance or taking it. Midnight found Clara dozing against the depot wall, her head tilted toward the stove's warmth. Thomas sat nearby, his expensive coat spread over both their shoulders like a shared secret. The silver watch lay open in his palm, catching firelight. "Can't sleep either?" Clara asked softly. "Keep thinking about that train." He closed the watch with a soft click. 3 months I've been planning this meeting, rehearsing every argument, every number. Outside, wind howled through telegraph wires, making them sing like a broken hymn. Clara pulled the telegram from her pocket again, unfolding it carefully. $60 a month, she said. Room and board included. I could send money back to help Mrs. Chen with her grandson's medicine. But you're not going. Storm decided that. She refolded the paper. Maybe it's a sign. Thomas shifted, and she caught the scent of bergamot soap, expensive cigars. Different world than hers entirely. My father started with nothing, he said. Came west after the war with a broken-down wagon and a pocket full of dreams. Built the first stamp mill in Clear Creek. Then another, then a dozen more. Sounds like he found what he was looking for. Did he? Thomas stared at the stove's glowing heart. 30 years later, he's dying in a mansion, surrounded by ledgers instead of people. Never took a day off, never missed a dividend payment, never learned his son's middle name. Clara turned to study his profile, strong jaw, but something uncertain in his eyes. What is it? Your middle name? James. After my mother's father. A smile ghosted across his face. She died when I was 7. Father never spoke of her after that. Too much like taking a chance on grief. The depot clock ticked toward 1, each second marked by tiny mechanical heartbeats. Clara found herself watching Thomas's hands, soft palms, but calluses at the fingertips where he wrote. You're not much like him, she said. Your father. No? Thomas looked at her, something shifting in his expression. I've spent 10 years trying to be exactly like him. Safe. Calculated. Never betting more than I could afford to lose. And now? Now I'm trapped in a snowstorm with a woman who's braver than she knows, wondering if I've wasted every day since I learned to count money. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm not brave. Brave women take the teaching job in Denver. Brave women also stay where they're needed. He paused. Question is, which kind of courage matters more? The stove settled with a soft sigh, embers shifting like tiny stars. Clara realized how close they sat, how natural it felt to share his coat's warmth. When was the last time someone had cared if she was cold? Tell me about the merger, she said. Boring business, railroad consolidation, mining rights, supply contracts. But his eyes came alive as he spoke. 3 companies joining resources, sharing risk. Could revolutionize how silver moves from mountain to mint. You know it backwards and forwards, every clause, every percentage. He paused. My father would have memorized the same details, but you understand what they mean, the human cost, the workers' families. Clara touched his hand. That's not the same thing. His fingers turned, catching hers. Warm despite the cold, steadier than his nervous habit with the watch suggested. What if we're both wrong? Thomas asked. What if courage isn't about staying or going, but about choosing the risk that helps someone else? Clara thought about her students, Tommy, whose father drank away his wages, Sarah, who walked 3 miles through snow to sit in the front row, little Miguel, whose English grew stronger every week. Then she thought about Mrs. Chen, counting coins for medicine, while her grandson coughed through long nights. The Denver job would help people too, she admitted. And my merger would keep 3,000 men employed through winter. Thomas squeezed her hand. Maybe we're both running from the same thing. Which is? The chance to matter. To someone who isn't counting what we cost them. 2 o'clock chimed through the storm-wrapped darkness. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the rise and fall of Thomas's breathing, the steady tick of his watch marking time they'd never get back. When she dozed again, she dreamed of trains that ran through snowstorms, carrying brave women toward chances they weren't afraid to take. Clara woke to grey dawn light, filtering through frost-covered windows and the smell of fresh coffee. Mrs. Bradshaw stood at the depot stove, pouring steaming liquid from a blue enamel pot. Storm's breaking, the cook announced as Clara untangled herself from Thomas's coat. He sat, slumped against the wall, his silver watch still clutched in one hand. Might have a train through by afternoon if the section crews can clear the tracks. Clara's heart jumped. The telegram crinkled in her pocket as she stood, working stiffness from her shoulders. Through the window she could see blue sky fighting through grey clouds, wind still gusting but without the fury of the night before. A train? Thomas was awake instantly, checking his watch against the depot clock. Eastbound? Should be. Depends on the drifts between here and Palmer Lake. Misses. Bradshaw handed Clara a tin cup of coffee, black and strong enough to wake the dead. Kowalski's gone to check the telegraph lines. Clara cupped the coffee's warmth, feeling yesterday's certainty slip away like snow from a roof. She could still catch the Denver train. Still, send that telegram. Thomas stood and stretched, then walked to the frosted window. How long would it take to clear the tracks? Few hours if they're lucky, all day if they're not. Misses. Bradshaw ladled cornbread batter onto a griddle. Weather might turn again. February's got more tricks than a medicine show. Clara pulled the telegram from her pocket, unfolding it on the wooden bench. The paper looked more fragile in daylight, edges soft with handling. Denver Mining Consortium. Position available. Reply by the 15th of February. Still got today, Mrs. Bradshaw observed, glancing at the yellow paper. Though barely. Thomas returned from the window, settling beside Clara. Without the intimacy of shared warmth and darkness, he seemed different, more distant, his expensive clothes marking the gulf between their worlds. "You'll take it," he said quietly. "The teaching job. I don't know." Clara refolded the telegram. "What about you? Still racing to Chicago, if that train runs?" But something in his voice suggested doubt. "Though I keep thinking about what you said, about helping people who aren't counting the cost." The depot door opened with a gust of cold air, and Kowalski stamped inside, shaking snow from his coat. "Telegraph's working, but barely. Lines are down past Castle Rock." "Any word from the section crews?" Mrs. Bradshaw asked, flipping cornbread on the griddle. "They're trying to punch through the drift at Devil's Gate. Might have the main line open by 2 o'clock." He glanced at Clara. "If you're sending that wire to Denver, miss, now's the time." Clara stood slowly, the telegram warm in her palm. Through the window she could see the storm's damaged drifts 4 feet high, fence posts buried to their tops. The world looked different than it had yesterday. Smaller somehow, more fragile. "How much to send a telegram to Chicago?" Thomas asked suddenly. Kowalski consulted his rate card. $2 for 10 words. Thomas pulled out his wallet, counting bills. "I need to send a message to Ashworth Mining and Railroad Company. Priority delivery." Clara watched him write on a telegraph form, his handwriting careful and precise. She couldn't read the words upside down, but she saw him pause twice, crossing out lines and rewriting them. "What are you telling them?" she asked. "That I missed the train." He signed the form with a flourish. "That the merger will have to wait until I can get there properly. With time to do it right instead of just fast. Your father won't understand." "Probably not." Thomas handed the form to Kowalski along with his money. "But maybe that's the point." Mrs. Bradshaw slid cornbread onto tin plates, the smell mixing with coffee and wood smoke. Clara accepted a piece gratefully, though her stomach felt too tight to hold much food. "What about you, miss?" Kowalski asked. "Sending that telegram?" Clara looked at the yellow paper in her hands, then at Thomas, watching her with eyes the color of winter sky. Yesterday, she'd been certain of her choice. Today felt different. The storm had changed something, not just the weather, but the shape of possibility itself. "I need a few more minutes," she said. But the depot clock kept ticking, and time wouldn't wait for her to find courage in the bottom of a coffee cup. The 2 o'clock whistle reached them before they saw the train, a lonesome sound threading through the mountains like hope made audible. Clara stood at the depot window, the telegram clutched in her hand, watching smoke rise above the tree line. "That'll be the eastbound," Kowalski announced, checking his pocket watch. "Running 4 hours late. But she's coming through." Thomas joined Clara at the window, close enough that she caught his scent of bergamot and wool. "Still time to change your mind," he said quietly. "About what?" "Denver, Chicago. Whatever chances we talked ourselves out of in the dark." Clara studied his reflection in the glass. "You first." The train whistle sounded again, closer now. Through the trees she glimpsed black smoke and the gleam of steel rails cleared by morning work crews. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a bird in a cage. "I wired Chicago," Thomas said. "Told them the merger could wait until I understood it properly. Asked for 2 weeks to study the human cost alongside the profit margins, and if they refuse, then I'll know what kind of men I was dealing with." He touched the silver watch in his vest pocket. "Sometimes the most important business is learning when to walk away." The telegram crinkled in Clara's fingers. Through the window she could see the engine now, massive and black against white snow, pulling passenger cars painted green as summer grass. The sight should have filled her with excitement. Instead, she felt hollow. "Mrs. Chen's grandson needs medicine," she said. $60 a month would pay for that and more. It would. And there are children in Denver who need teachers just as much as mine do here. True again. Clara turned from the window to face him. But yesterday you told me brave women stay where they're needed." Thomas smiled, but his eyes held questions. Today, I'm wondering if they also recognize when they've found something worth staying for. The train pulled into the station with a hiss of steam and screech of brakes. Clara could see passengers moving in the windows, traveling salesmen and mining officials bound for Denver and points east. Her future, if she wanted to claim it. Mrs. Bradshaw appeared at Clara's elbow with a wrapped bundle of cornbread. For the journey, if you're going, I haven't decided. Haven't you? The cook's eyes were kind, but knowing. Sometimes the heart decides before the head catches up. Thomas stepped closer. Come with me. To Chicago? Anywhere. His voice dropped low. Yesterday, you said you regretted taking the wrong chances. What if this is the right one? The conductor's voice boomed across the platform. All aboard for Denver, Kansas City, and Chicago. 5-minute stop. Clara felt the telegram's edges, soft with handling. $60 a month. Medicine for Mrs. Chen's grandson. A chance to matter in a wider world. Then she looked at Thomas, really looked, and saw past the expensive clothes to the man who'd shared his coat in the cold, who'd chosen conscience over profit, who'd missed his train but found something else worth catching. What would I do in Chicago? Teach. Start a school for miners' children. Help me figure out how to run a company with a heart. His hand found hers. Build something together that matters to more than just ourselves. The whistle blew. Steam hissed. Clara felt time pulling her toward a choice she couldn't unmake. She walked to the telegraph window where Kowalski waited with his key. I need to send a wire. To Denver? Clara shook her head. To the superintendent of schools in Colorado Springs. She wrote quickly on the form. Tell him I'll be staying through spring term, but I'll need help finding medicine for Mrs. Chen's grandson. Thomas was beside her before she finished writing. And after spring term? After spring term, Clara folded the telegram carefully, tucking it into her pocket like a keepsake. After spring term, I might just catch a train to Chicago, if the offer's still good. The offer's good. Thomas checked his silver watch one last time, then closed it with a soft click. For as long as you'll have it. The eastbound pulled away in a cloud of steam and possibility, carrying other people's chances toward distant horizons. Clara and Thomas stood together on the empty platform, watching it disappear around the mountain curve. No regrets? He asked. Clara thought about courage and choices, about storms that changed the shape of everything they touched. Only one. What's that? I waited until a blizzard to learn your middle name. Thomas laughed, the sound warm as coffee, bright as morning light on fresh snow. James, he said. Thomas James Ashworth. And yours? Hope. Clara smiled up at him. Clara Hope Hartwell. Hope. He said it like a prayer. Perfect. The depot bell chimed 3 o'clock, marking time they'd never get back but didn't need to. Outside, spring snow was already melting in the Colorado sun. 6 months later, Clara stood in the doorway of a one-room schoolhouse in the Chicago stockyards, watching 23 children bent over their slates. Sunlight slanted through tall windows, illuminating faces from Ireland and Poland, Germany and Mexico, all learning English together with the determination their parents brought to America. Miss Hartwell, 8-year-old Anna Kowalski, distant cousin of the Colorado Springs telegraph operator, raised her hand. Will you tell us again about the blizzard? Clara smiled, touching the yellowed telegram she still carried in her pocket like a talisman. Not the job offer from Denver, she'd never sent that wire. This was different. A letter from Mrs. Chen, written in careful English, thanking her for the medicine money that arrived every month like clockwork. What would you like to know about it? How did you know to stay? Anna's English carried the music of her mother's Polish, the rhythm of dreams made audible. Through the window, Clara could see Thomas walking up the street, his silver watch chain catching afternoon light. He'd kept his promise about running the company differently, profit shared with workers, families housed properly, children educated, regardless of their parents' ability to pay. Sometimes storms teach us things, Clara said, watching her students' faces turn toward her like flowers toward sun. About courage, about taking the right chances instead of the safe ones. And about love? Anna asked with the boldness of 8 years old. Clara's hand found the simple gold band on her finger, Thomas's grandmother's ring, resized and polished, bright as hope, and about love. The school bell chimed 4 o'clock. Children gathered their books and slates, chattering in 3 languages as they spilled toward the door. Anna paused at Clara's desk. My mamma says you gave up a better job to stay and help people. Your mamma's very wise. She says that's what brave women do. Clara thought about a telegram never sent, a train never caught, a chance that led to chances she'd never imagined possible. Sometimes, Anna, sometimes brave women also learn when to let storms carry them where they need to go. The little girl nodded solemnly and skipped toward the door, where Thomas waited to walk Clara home to the house they'd bought near the lake, close enough to hear steamships calling to each other in the night. Good day? He asked, offering his arm. The best kind. Clara pulled the door closed on another day of small miracles. Ready to head home? Always, he said. As long as you're there to share the journey. They walked together through the Chicago evening, past vendors calling their wares and children playing stickball in gaslit streets. Behind them, the schoolhouse windows glowed golden with promise. Ahead, lake wind carried the sound of ships setting out for distant harbors. Clara squeezed Thomas's arm, thinking of storms that changed everything, trains that carried some people away and brought others home, and the mysterious arithmetic of love that turned 2 separate chances into one shared life. The depot bell in her memory chimed once more, not lonely anymore, but full of all the possibilities that waited just beyond the next curve in the rails. If something in this story touched you, linger with us. We'll handle the rest.